Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square's state government reporter, and today is Wednesday, May the 6th of 2026. And in today's episode, a federal lawsuit filed by a Washington state couple, a Christian couple who for years were a dedicated couple that did foster care for the state of Washington, weren't able to do so after 2022 when Washington state, through the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, embraced some gender ideology policy changes. Well, their lawsuit through the Alliance Defending Freedom network of legal counsel is now able to proceed more than 2 years after it was filed. We'll have an update from one of the senior legal advisors at Alliance Defending Freedom on that hugely important case, and reaction that I got today from DCYF on what they're doing as a result of this, and a policy change that's apparently coming very soon, most likely because of this lawsuit. And then Wallet Hub's new report that is out on financial literacy education and where states stack up. Where does Washington fall in their new report as far as how good our high school graduates are coming out with knowledge of the basics of financial literacy? Can you balance a checkbook? Not that anybody has a checkbook anymore, but what's a monthly budget look like? What does insurance look like? What does student loan debt compiling over years look like? Turns out Washington is not doing so well on that. We'll have a breakdown with Wallet Hub. And then finally, a tease for tomorrow's show, because later this afternoon, I'm going to be interviewing someone from the Association of Washington Business about their recent survey of their members. They did a survey of all of their members in the month of April, basically an outlook like, what's business looking like for you? Are things good at this point? Are they bad? What is the outlook? Pretty shocking findings on what Washington businesses are saying, and a shocking number, especially of those that are talking about relocating or simply selling their business because of the current tax climate and basically the anti-business climate here in Washington state in recent years. So all that is coming up. Let's dive into today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Now, Washington's Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF, has lost a bid to have a lawsuit against their agency dismissed. So that case is going to be moving forward. At the same time, DCYF is now amending a policy, in fact, this month, amending a policy that was a requirement for foster parents in the state of Washington to embrace where the state has gone with gender ideology, pronouns, and the like. If required them to sign a document that said, if there's a child in my home that's a boy but wants to be living like a girl, called a girl, different name, different pronouns, you have to embrace that policy. Well, this Christian couple refused to do that and they lost their license, but appealed. Lawsuit then subsequently filed in 2024 by Alliance Defending Freedom on behalf of this couple, Shane and Jennifer DeGrasse. Had the opportunity to interview them a couple of years ago when this case was first filed, and have followed this with some interest moving forward. I didn't realize that things have been kind of on hold while DCYF moved to have the case dismissed. But they lost that bid last week, and the case is now moving forward. I had a conversation yesterday with Alliance Defending Freedom Senior Counsel Johannes Widmalm Delphonse. I said his name right. That's the only time I'm going to say it, but he taught me how to pronounce it. Here's some of that conversation with ADF.
They were foster parents for 9 years in the state of Washington and cared for 4 different children over a period of 9 years, including 2 children who they cared for long periods of time. In 2022, when they sought to renew their license, they encountered a new DCYF policy, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, which explicitly said that foster parents had to agree to use the child's chosen name and pronouns no matter what. Otherwise, they couldn't qualify as foster parents. They told DCYF that they would lovingly care for any child, but they didn't want to use inaccurate pronouns, and DCYF refused to accept their application. We sued. DCOF backtracked and said, we'd love to take your application, just fill out this waiver form. And they went through the entire process, which it ended up taking over a year. And then DCOF ended up putting arbitrary restrictions on their license, stating that they couldn't care for any child long term if the child was over 5 years old. They couldn't accept emergency placements. They had to take training on LGBT topics, which, in our view, was intended to change their religious beliefs, and other arbitrary restrictions that not only discriminated against the DeGrasses, but we also felt were deterrents to any other religious families to apply to become foster parents in the state.
Now, according to the most recent numbers that I could find, 2025 statistics, there are about 4,800 kids in the foster care system. Many of these kids are, taken from their biological parents for whatever period of time. Many of them are placed with relatives who are their foster caregivers, but there are about 2,300 foster parents that are not family, not relative care placements. um, those numbers are certainly down from what they were years ago. How much the gender ideology policy and being forced to sort of abandon maybe your own religious principles has played into that is unclear. But as a result of this lawsuit and pressure on DCYF to do away with this policy, and allow people to have their religious objections because it's their, First Amendment right to have those religious objections, they are currently amending the policy. I reached out to DCYF on this exact case. I said, I want your reaction to the fact you lost your hope to get this case dismissed, and what is the current policy. And I did receive a response back. We'll put that up for you. Um, Citing the current, Washington Administrative Code, the current WAC, and that number's up there. They say it's currently being revised. DCYF received public comment on proposed changes as part of the rulemaking process. That was an email statement from DCYF's Director of External Communications, Nancy Gutierrez. And then I went on to press her further about the policy change, and she said, we are reviewing public comment during the month of May. We will have a better idea regarding the timeline and changes once that is complete. I read that to mean the current policy requiring this gender ideology adoption for foster parents remains in place. She didn't say otherwise, but as a result of this lawsuit moving forward now, in fact, this state agency is moving to revise its policy. So stay tuned at the end of this month when they review all the public comments they received. I expect the adoption of a new policy, and we'll let you know what that is. Now, to a new report that came out from Wallet Hub this week on financial literacy and where Washington falls in relation to other states for how our high school graduates are doing in that regard. Can they balance a checkbook? Do they know what credit card interest is, and how debt compiles? Well, the answer is not so much, because currently Washington does not require, although some districts have adopted financial literacy education, but we don't require it as a graduation requirement, although many states do. So here is Chip Lupo with Wallet Hub kind of breaking that down for you.
The states that do well in it have a requirement, an actual graduation requirement for students to take at least a personal finance course, at least one economics course, standard, or at least require standardized testing of personal finance concepts or economic concepts. And Washington has none of those. Now, this is not to say that certain school districts in Washington may offer economics or personal finance classes. There is just no requirement for them to take one in order to graduate. And that shows in the fact that Washington is 43rd in the share of public high school students who are guaranteed to take at least one semester course in personal finance for graduation, 2.7%. But most of your personal finance courses would involve simply how to balance a checkbook, how interest works, how credit cards will work, and how the interest on credit cards is different from other types of interest, and the different types of interest rates and bank accounts that are available out there. And some may get a little bit into simple investing, whether it's investing in CDs or how to play the stock market, but those are probably a little bit more advanced. But again, those do vary on the states. But at the bare minimum, you're going to get in a personal finance course basically how to balance a checkbook and how interest works, how mortgage works, and oftentimes some tips on how to get out of debt. So I do find it kind of interesting that most of these states that are business friendly states are also the states that do well in terms of introducing budgeting education in their curriculums.
Part of this report from Wallet Hub found that 9 in 10 Americans believe that, budgeting and financial literacy should absolutely be taught in American high schools. Yet he said 17 out of 50 states, only 17 out of 50 states got their A rating. And to have an A rating, you had to have, you complete a standalone personal finance course and sort of integrate that financial literacy education throughout curriculum. Maybe in some states do it even, going back into elementary grades. Certainly you could teach some basics, even as part of a math course. And Washington State is currently moving in this direction. Unclear how soon it's going to be happening, but had a conversation just before today's podcast with Representative Skylar Rude, Republican out of Walla Walla. He has, for the last 3 years, backed a piece of legislation, House Bill 1285, that is seeking to make it a requirement in high schools. He wanted to give some flexibility, for local districts, local control, a big deal for him, but basically say, okay, figure out a way to integrate this in to your curriculum and make it a graduation requirement. He kind of backed off pushing the bill this year. It was introduced, but it never got a public hearing. And he told me today that is because the Washington Board of Education is currently adopting new graduation requirements. This is something they've been working on for the last couple of years. I think they call it Future Ready. I've listened in on some of those meetings. Some critics say there is maybe in some areas a dumbing down of graduation requirements. That's for another day. But Representative Rude has been assured that financial literacy education is going to be included. He's not sure what that looks like. And the timeline, he thinks, is unfortunately pushed out a little bit. He's getting an update on Tuesday. So he has promised to let me know after he gets that update from the State Education Board exactly what that looks like. So you'll know here as soon as I find out on Tuesday, kind of what that is going to look like. But it would have been nice, probably. Many of you, like me, maybe made some of those mistakes when you were young and didn't really pay attention to people who said, don't buy a car when you're 20. Don't get yourself in credit card debt early on in life because it'll come back to bite you, or it'll bite you just very bit over a long period of time. Some of that financial literacy education when you're younger might have helped many of us, including Representative Rude, who says he got himself in that same trouble when he was young and he wants to help other young people avoid that. By the way, an early happy birthday to Representative Rude, who turns 40 next week, he said. And he didn't say I had to keep it a secret. Again, he's getting that update on Tuesday and we'll share it with you. And now a new tease for a tomorrow story with the Association of Washington Business. They did a survey last month. They do this every spring, surveying all of their members. Like, how do you feel? How's your business doing? What's difficult for you? What's working well? What are you thinking about expansion plans, or you're going to relocate? And it turns out this year's survey revealed some pretty disturbing trends, with nearly 1 in 4 employers considering relocating outside of the state of Washington, driven in large part by high taxes, regulatory burdens, and other economic concerns. So later today, for a story I'm going to be writing up tomorrow, and then also talking about in our Washington in Focus daily episode for Thursday, I'm going to be speaking with AWB's government affairs director for a kind of a deeper dive into their findings. I want to hear exactly what members' concerns were and ask him if, in fact, is it the coming income tax if it ends up, being upheld here in the state of Washington. I did speak last week, and we shared a bit of that in one of our episodes last week with Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital Management, because he told me straight up, I am considering relocating. Whether I take all of my employees with me and move to another state like Arizona or Idaho, where he already has some business interests, or just, relocating his personal residence to those states to avoid the coming income tax. But he also shared with me something that I hadn't, shared in the episode from last week. And he said he really thinks it's the direction of the state, even outside of all the tax burdens and the regulatory climate, that for him as a Christian, he said it's really more about the direction that morality has moved in the state of Washington. And he said basically some of those things have really turned him off.
Common sense and family values and neighborhoods looking after each other, and watching the way that that's morphed, and watching the animosity between, like, it's just not, it's really weird. I'm not one of these people that invents these kinds of things, but you can just see it when you travel. Go somewhere like Idaho, go somewhere like Montana, go somewhere like Arizona, go walk down the street. You'll be shocked at just the feel, right? The interaction with other people, the pleasant interactions you have with people, the cleanliness of the streets, the quality is like, it's like a dark cloud has descended over the state, and it's just, everybody's angry and bitter, and it's a mess. It's not, and that's another part of us being willing to leave if we need to, is just, it's really quickly turning into a place that I don't recognize.
So again, a tease for tomorrow's episode, a much deeper dive with the Association of Washington Business. I'll be speaking this afternoon with their government affairs director. And they are also today meeting with state lawmakers, discussing some of the findings from their membership survey that they conducted last month. My understanding is they were meeting with several lawmakers from both parties. So I'm very curious to get the update from AWB on how this was received by lawmakers, and further discussion of how the income tax may affect all of this. So that's a wrap on today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this May the 6th of 2026. Make it a great rest of the day, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.